Okay. Welcome everybody. I think it's only on YouTube at the moment. Maybe X and Twitch, I'm not sure. Waiting for TikTok real quick. In either case, welcome to everybody who's here. Simulation here, and you're the first one today. That's amazing. Took a snapshot of that. Awesome, man. Say hi. Okay, TikTok sliding in. Welcome, Rose. How are you? Welcome to Simulation Talk 86, and we're filling up quick. Okay. What's up, Elliot? Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. I'll do a short intro in a moment. Billy, Johnny, Tamara Campbell, user 314, whatever, or something. Welcome, welcome. What's up, N? What's up, Siegel? All right, I think we can start. Maybe wait just one more moment before everybody to show up. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Joey, Mike, Starshine. What's up, Strange Things Happen? I wrote an article on Hacker Noon about this and also shared to the Rogan Reddit with over 25k views. Oh, I didn't know that. Also, I didn't know there's a Rogan Reddit. Funny enough, Rogan probably didn't read it. Rogan never checks these things. But I appreciate you. That's so cool of you. I'm going to go check it out on the Rogan thing. Awesome, the 51 project. Couple people ordered it today without a name and without an address. It's up 113. That wouldn't be you by any chance, would it be? The 51 project? If it is, if you can check and then add that information, because can't really send a laser without that. Okay, good. Yeah, it was very strange. Skylar, good to see you. Are you prepping for the storm? Charles, hello, my Rapid City, South Dakota, USA. What's up, Prush? Okay. I think it's we can start. You can order the laser on codeofreality.com. And I'm obligated to give the disclaimer that we only started making these lasers because people insisted. You can definitely save money by just ordering it yourself on Amazon. And we have a list there on the same website. I'll put it right here. That you can just take whatever items you see. As long as it's the same specs, you can order it from anywhere you want. If it's a money-saving thing, then you should absolutely do that. We kind of made ours more compact and easy to carry and easy to attach to things. So it's definitely easier to use and comes prepared. And also you're helping the project. But once again, if anybody money is an issue, don't feel obligated to get it from us. You can just source it anywhere you would like. Codeofreality.com, I think it's correct. Also, you guys will excuse me because today was a very long day. We shot inside of a Temazcal. It's like a sweat lodge in Mexico, and we shot inside and outside, and it was very exhausting but fun. So my brain might be a little bit fried, but the show must go on, and we're here. So let me do a short intro to all the newcomers. This channel usually revolves around the simulation hypothesis. My name is Danny, and I'm claiming to have found actual proof that we live in a simulation. I've devised an experiment a few years ago, and I discovered that if you project a diffracted laser on the surface and you ingest a particular molecule that can't really name on a live chat, you will see code running in surfaces, and this observation has now been verified over 1,000 times worldwide, which connected me to some of the leading researchers in the field. This is not to say that all of them agree with me. In fact, some of them disagree with me about my conclusions. However, all the people that disagree with me, as far as I know, have not seen the code itself. So, I maintain that The conversation is very important and what I found is real. And we meet here every single day to discuss the experiment, the implications, the discovery itself, as well as science in general, religion, spirituality, philosophy, God, and whatever comes to mind. So, with that, all of that being said, thank you for the likes, Anton. Thank you for the likes, Skylar. Love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll dive right in. Oh, Rose, good to see you here. And recently, the trailer for the movie documentary they're working went viral, so there's a lot of people that kind of know about the project through that. So we're getting a lot of questions around that stuff in the last few days. So I appreciate that, and great uptake in views. So that's always encouraging. So let's dive right in. By the way, if you're just entering and you just missed my introduction, it doesn't matter if you're on X, YouTube, Twitch, or TikTok. Feel free to throw a comment and say, hey, can you please repeat what you guys are doing? And I don't mind doing that. Okay, let's see. This is the best thing to happen since the lava lamp. I agree. And the lava lamp was a big deal. So I feel very proud of this. Anyone who can surpass the lava lamp should feel accomplished. If this is a simulation, how should it affect our morality? I think that in terms of what the nature of the simulation exactly is would determine that. But I think that the simple answer is you should live as moral of a life as you would if you would want to do that for any other reason. If you think you should live a moral life because of religious predispensations, that's fine. I maintain that living a moral life because kind of knowing that it's good is the better way to go. But, I think that doesn't really change anything there, aside from maybe the fact if you know for a fact that you live in a simulation and there's some oversight over you, even if you don't believe in the religious story, then that might make you reconsider how you behave in any given moment, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So much segregation and categorization at the end of the day, borscht is. Thank you, Fast Food Guido, for the joke of the day. I appreciate you. Charles, good to see you here. So like the Matrix, actually kind of like the Matrix upside down. In the Matrix, in the movie The Matrix, we're stuck inside of a computer software. In reality, the real world is a computational world, and we are a subset of that larger computational world. So, ironically, we are the fake world, or the less real world. Okay, as silly as it sounds, is it even conceivable for a photo of some kind of capture the code, such as digital microscope? Well, absolutely. I think that ultimately when we're going to figure out exactly along what continuum we're seeing this and why we don't see it without the molecule, but we do see it with the molecule, and then what is it exactly about the laser itself, I think it has a lot to do with holography at this point. But yeah, definitely. I think that the second we're going to start having a theoretical framework around it, we're going to start working on some experimentation that have to do with building devices that might go search for it without any person observing it. Maybe yes, maybe no, but it's not a crazy question. No, I like that question. I see your procedure as a specific sequence. Good stuff. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Madgura, but you said good stuff, which makes me happy, so spot on. Didn't mean to send that yet, sorry. What do you mean? That was a great question. I wonder if the laser might show different patterns on temples, etc. Oh, maybe. So far, no different surface provided any different code. Even our skin looks all the same. I mean, the same kind of pattern. Maybe it is different. It's just kind of hard to see because there's a lot going on. If this is a simulation, what exactly do you believe we are? Is our consciousness recycled? That's a great question. I think your broader question is whether or not we have an external representation. Would that be the more accurate question? Correct me if I'm wrong. Or are we just pure information? I'm leaning more towards the pure information because it seems more neat. And who doesn't like neat? But maybe we have an external representation. I'm not sure. And if your question wasn't that, you can feel free to clarify. If you mean your personal point of view, I mean that you can say that's recycled either way. It's just a thing that kind of it's a fleeting phenomenon, right? It's kind of like a query in a river. It's not really like it's a pattern, but it's not a thing. Like it just kind of dissipates with time. And I feel like your personal point of view is like that, but the informational pattern that gives rise to consciousness or whatever consciousness is at base, not only it's not recycled, it's the only thing that is actually eternal. That's my perception of it. Nico, thank you so much, but I appreciate you. I'm leaning more towards idealism that states that consciousness is fundamental. The methods to see it is not. The methods to see it is not as you think it is. Yoga equals slow, the molecule equals instant. I don't know what you would put an emphasis on yoga specifically. As far as I understand the whole endeavor, especially the way that yoga is practiced in the West, I personally would say it's definitely not the tool. So like if you're talking about like yoga, like where the actual practice, the way it really is practiced in the East, maybe. But then I think any form of meditation probably would do. And so far, when we tried meditation, doesn't actually cut it. Something tells me that there's something about the molecule that's a little different. I know there's a lot of claims about breath work being able to produce the same results. I think the simple answer is no, it does not. I mean, I've had this conversation with a few breathwork practitioners, even ones that have been doing it for decades. And when pressed on this point, when really asked about it, point blank, yeah, so wait, you want to tell me that like it produces the visuals and everything? They will always tell you, well, no, not the visuals. Well, okay, well then it's different, right? There's something different. You said the three people that you know of have seen it or claim to have. I think this is a very important. If real, we should aim to find out what these people are doing to get into the altered state. They were not in an altered state, by the way. I think it's just how they naturally are. Some people, I think, are just more open to that space. Test happened. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate a comment from X always. So even if it just says test. Also, am I red because of the Tamascal? Yeah, I'm red. And last one from me. Do you ever discuss or debate with the British guy? His channel called Adaptus Psychonautica. Yeah, I was on his channel a couple times. Super nice guy. We also had a conversation that he never released yet. He said he wants to, but I know he was doing a lot of things in his personal life. He was traveling. He was soul seeking. He was. I'm sure he's going to be talking about it. I don't want to, put the carriage before the horse. But yeah, it was in a lot of personal journey stuff, which I deeply respect. But yeah, I like him. His name is Rob, and I'm sure we'll talk again. You can only view it under the influence of the molecule. At the moment, it seems that for most people, yes. 3 people that I know saw it without. But I would say they didn't see it as coherently. It wasn't as concrete. Nico is saying, I think it's possible to use an MRI or EEG to read data of the brain during the laser experiment too. I agree with that. Potentially, they couldn't solve the code. Yeah, well, maybe I think decoding the code is going to be a while, but seeing a pattern that is recognizable from the outside, I agree with that, actually. And again, like I was speaking about it yesterday, do we put ourselves in a simulation? No, but we are living in a computational environment. By the way, Rose, I think you wanted to come on and chat. If I'm not mistaken, I don't see you sending in a request. Do you want me to send you an invite? How does that work? And Skylar, I don't think you told me anything. I know my fiance's parents told me that the storm is coming. Should hit you guys about Thursday, right? Wednesday or Thursday? Let me know. Do we put back to femininity? The answer is that we live in a computational environment, and the simulation in this context just means a sliver of reality. What's up, Lindsay? Send a request. Interesting. It doesn't allow me to do that. I think you need to request. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know why. It doesn't allow me to do that. Weird. So see if you can send a request. And what were we saying? What's up, Lindsay? Good to see you. Oh yeah, and if you guys are enjoying this, if you can like the live across all platforms, that would be extremely helpful to send to advertise the live to more people. YouTube, Twitch, X, and TikTok, all of it. Thank you guys. Nico, so happy you're coming on. How you doing, man?
Hey Danny, how's it going?
I'm doing amazing. Good to hear from you.
I had a question.
No.
Do you think the code is meant to be read, or because I'm kind of thinking of are we supposed to be trying to read the raw stream, or are we supposed to be using like a filter to read it, right? Like something in between it. I don't know. I was kind of just thinking about that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have no idea. I mean, obviously, I have no idea, right? I only know that it's actually there. Whether or not it's some kind of the machine code level, is it something that is a combination between you can operate it as machine code, or you can also operate it as the actual, um, on the coders level? Not on a, I'm not really sure. Um, yeah, it's a good question. I think because I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of holography recently, I'm trying to uh, put forth like what can it be actually, and I think that it makes sense to me that it would be us staring back at the walls of the whatever surface that is that gives rise to the three-dimensional hologram that we're in. But as far as for the validity of the code itself, I'm not really sure. I think it's too early to say. Maybe I'm wrong, and I know a lot of people are interested in that, but I think we're a little bit too early in the game to really comment on that in any serious way. I know it might be a little disappointing, but I'm trying to stay close to what I can say with any amount of certainty, you know? So,
Gotcha.
yeah, the second, did you watch that video that I was talking about by Three Blue, One Brown?
No, I didn't get a chance to see that. I do follow that channel. I mean, every abstract mathematical concept that I think I understand is because of that channel. Um,
Yeah,
so
he's
I'll
great.
definitely take a look at it.
What's his name? Garrett or something? But, um, but yeah, the last video he put out was about holograms, and it was kind of random because it was the same day that I was thinking about it in these terms. And then I saw a clip, and usually, he does. I mean, obviously, he broke it down in terms of mathematics, which was fascinating all by itself. But then it was so much similarities between also the way it looks, like the way the code looks in the laser, and also the elements. Like everything there was just screaming at me. It was like, this is it. And I was like, oh my god, okay. So, yeah, I have to figure out how we map this onto what we're saying, and I think then we'll be
The
able to.
last question that I have,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, the last question I have before I let Rose jump on is
You can also stick around, by the way. I always love when you're here. So go ahead.
oh, thank you. Yeah. So you mentioned yesterday that different wavelengths seem to have different, slightly different content. And one thing that I was wondering is instead of a single wavelength laser, if you had a coherent white light source, which then went through a prism, which then got diffracted, could you constructively interfere several wavelengths together to kind of complete like a stream? You know what I mean?
So are
Of
you
different
saying
wavelengths.
split the light, diffract it?
So you get a rainbow.
Yeah,
You get a rainbow after you split the white
diffracted
light.
rainbow. It's interesting. I think there's something specifically about coherent light and not just about a broken light to the different frequencies. So the prism will break the light into the different wavelengths, but it's not quite the same as a laser. And there's something, and the insistence in the beginning when I just discovered it was no, no, it was like laser. Specifically, it has to be coherent light. It has to be.
Well,
And
my
now,
understanding of coherent light is that all the rays are parallel, right, to each other.
and it's the exact. So when the photons fall to the electrons fall the exact amount, they produce the exact photon. And I don't think that what prism produces on the other side is equivalent to coherent light. I might be wrong, but it doesn't seem to me that way at all. We can actually look it up right now.
Oh, interesting.
That's
Yeah, because
prism.
I know an LED. Yeah, so an LED uses like it's called like an NP junction
Right.
to essentially give you a quantized packet of light, and it's. I mean, LEDs are not perfect, right? There's actually a distribution of wavelengths
Mm-hmm.
that you get. It's
Mm-hmm.
very tight, but it's pretty good. Um,
Yeah. So the answer, by the way, is no. Prism breaks
uh,
white light into its component colors, which is called dispersion, not into coherent light.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so that wouldn't work. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
So it's specifically the fact that the way it works. Again, if you know, even if you know, it's okay. I'll just reiterate for the audience for a second. It's the fact that you excite the electrons to exactly the same level, and they all drop to the exact amount of the orbital. So they drop to the next orbital, and that produces the exact kind of photon because it has the exact same energy, and that is what a laser is. Um, what were you doing with the Kip Thorne thing, by the way, for real?
Oh, Caltech had a screening of Oppenheimer,
Mm.
the movie, and Kip Thorne was given the context of Oppenheimer and the significance of the film and everything. And they had a little an autograph signing. People were taking photos and doing autographs. And I didn't have like my gravitation textbook for him to sign, but I just wanted to know if he was, up in current with the latest stuff. And I personally don't like string theory because, as you mentioned yesterday, it's not really a theory because it can't be disproven, right? You can always there's too many degrees of freedom in string theory.
Yeah.
Like it can always just create another dimension and it can always like force fit a solution to work. And so but I do think you're right. Like I think the people that really should criticize it should be the people that are fluent in the mathematics of it. But personally, I think a theory should be able to be disproven and also tested. String theory can't really be tested, from what I understand, experimentally. And so I am like a very big fan of testable theories of everything, and that's kind of where that's why this is so captivating to me, right? And that's also where the study of Wolfram's work and other theories together are very exciting for me. So
So do you think so? So basically, if so anybody who's just joining, so Nico went and to a little signing by Kip Thorne, who's a famous scientist, and you asked him if he knows about Wolfram's work,
yeah, so
and he
I said, I said, is string theory dead? And he said, not yet. And so he kind of laughed.
not yet in 2 hours.
What's funny is I went to a talk once many years ago. It was called "How to Talk to a Nobel Laureate," right? And most people when they talk to Nobel laureates, they kind of kiss their butt. They kind of say, "Hey, I'm a big fan of your work, this and that. You're so awesome and amazing." And what this one person that was giving the lecture said is like, they hear this millions of times all day, every day. And the way to really talk to them is to kind of challenge their way of thinking, their framework, say something controversial or something, right? So
Hey
I
kid,
opened,
hey kid, hey, what do you think about Wolfram's work?
yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you've been following like Wolfram, but like
Oh yeah,
Sean Carroll pushed back on Wolfram, right? He was kind of like, trying to, really criticizing. And like Wolfram gets a lot of shit because he kind of left the academic circle jerk of publishing papers, right? He's not playing that game anymore. He's doing his own thing. He's not putting the physics experiment out into the academic literature. He's just doing it, which I respect a ton because I think he's moving much faster than he could
yeah,
ever move.
yeah. And he's also a
It follows the
technologist and a business
source.
person, so he's a person of action. Like he's not just a
Exactly.
exactly. And by the way, he himself said this that he doesn't think that what he has is a theory, but a framework. So he thinks
Right.
that this is a framework through which to look at other theories. And by the way, Sean Carroll, his whole style is that he only sticks to what is kind of like the most promising central thing, which I totally get, right? But
Well,
that's
and
kind of,
and Sean Carroll's very fixed on the like formalism of like quantum mechanics and general relativity, and like he's taken this like Everettian approach of like it's just a very like sophisticated, elegant approach,
I'm
right?
also
Where
Everettian, by the way.
yeah, I know. I'm still very Copenhagen. I still like the Copenhagen
I
approach.
don't understand. We should have this discussion once.
We might have to fight over this
Yeah, yeah.
or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't. But
Probability of
I don't
what?
know.
Okay. No, okay,
um,
continue. Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I asked him if he's aware of Wolfram's work, and he said that yeah, and he's excited to see us. He hopes he's around to see it mature, right? Because it is the beginning of a. The problem with the theory of everything is it not only does it have to explain everything that is currently happening, right, which is a crazy feat of its own, but it then has to predict new things, right? And it has to be testable and disprovable by experiment. And so, in the stages of creating a theory of everything, the first stage is you first have to explain the world. And right now, Wolfram is currently doing that. It's still like the infancy of this theory, right? And in reality, it's probably going to take a long time. I mean, it took Einstein 10 years, right, to go from special to general relativity. And I think that's kind of mind blowing that he did it so fast. I think special relativity he did at 26, right? 26 years
He
old.
was
Like I
26,
was
yeah.
a
I think
complete,
it
I
well
was like
at
an idiot primate at 26.
1905, yeah.
1905. Was it 05? I thought that was a photoelectric effect.
No,
I
photoelectric
don't
effect. I
know.
think it was 1915. You can check me on this. No, or maybe that's when he
Okay.
got his Nobel Prize for it. I don't remember, but no, but that he wrote that. Oh man, I'm actually mixing up my timelines. I remember there was something in 19. It doesn't really matter. But one of these
Yeah.
years he got his Nobel Prize for it, or maybe it was 1925. But it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that the Nobel Prize that he got was for something completely different than what everybody knows him for because it was too
Like
radical. It was just too
his
radical.
trivial
It
his
was just,
trivial work.
well, it
Yeah.
wasn't trivial. It added quite a
It
bit.
wasn't trivial, and actually a lot of quantum mechanicists say that actually like that's the first quantum contribution, right? Is the
Yeah,
photoelectric effect.
because he discovered that particles can actually behave well, also like waves and also like particles.
Yeah, it wasn't trivial, but relative to his all his other work, it's like kind of like, oh, like that one paper that you published, like your first paper was like your Nobel Prize. So
when I spoke
yeah,
to Lev Levitin, he said that he thinks it's because it was just too radical. It was just too crazy to some for some. It's almost like it would be a stain on the Nobel Prizes committee to give something for something that like outlandish, even though it was already clear that it's probably true. But
wow.
it was very very out there. I think. I mean, it really broke the rules in a lot of different ways. What I wonder though, and this is something that if one day I'll talk to Sean Carroll, I will definitely ask him because I know that like Wolfram said, it's more of a framework, and Sean Carroll is huge now on looking at everything through the frame of actually the holographic principle,
Mm.
and the holographic principle, I guess you can call it theory, but it's also a framework because it's basically a principle through which you now can view other theoretical physics, theories of physics, because you can make sense of a lot of different theories through that lens, and that's what makes it more of a framework. And the same thing with Wolfram. And I think maybe because it's competing with that, there's something about. I actually, funny enough, I just started listening to a conversation between Sean Carroll and David Deutsch that was like 11 months ago or something. And this is one of the things that he said he also disagrees with Deutsch about, which is this whole focus on, knowledge and constructor theory and what is possible and impossible versus looking at it through the classical way of doing things, which is spin, momentum, all of that stuff. And it is interesting because I'll give Sean Carroll this, that even though if he's skeptical, he's always very open minded and willing to engage with it. I think he likes to put his bets where they're most likely to succeed, and he built an incredible career doing that, and he's very very thorough, and very,
Yes.
yeah. So I would say I actually
You know,
used to not like him until, because he had this kind of almost like a, it felt to me like he had this kind of like almost a like a brush off kind of, oh, this is nonsense kind of thing to a lot of things that I personally liked. But then I met a physicist who I became really good friends with, and he really loves him. And I was
Okay.
like, oh, come on, man. And he's like, look. And then he explained to me, like, from a physicist point of view, like why he really likes the way it works. And then I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then I kind of reconsidered and I started listening to him again with this frame, actually. And I started liking him because I noticed that he does allow for.
You can go to his. I mean, when he was at Caltech, he moved to John Hopkins University, but you can walk into his office and talk to him, and he'll talk to you. I challenged him once because I thought the multiverse theory violated the laws of thermodynamics. Like, I was like, wait, you can't just split a universe. Like, you just double the energy of this. Like, and
Well, no,
he,
it's fungibility, and then it splits into total space. But that's if
yeah,
you
and so
believe in the
he,
Everett interpretation. Yeah.
yeah, so he explained this entire. He like took like 15 minutes to explain this entire thing to me. But if you email him, he'll totally respond to you. Like he'll totally
Okay. Well,
give you
I want, by the way, today, and I just realized Rose, you feel free to jump in also to this conversation. By the way, don't feel like you're imposing. You can just jump in if you want. The
No, I'm enjoying just listening.
Oh, cool. Just making sure that we're not like um, speaking over you here. I actually today, yeah. This I don't want to talk about it too soon, but I have somebody that I haven't spoken to in a while contacted me today, and we were talking about some other potential experiments around the thing, and it also has to do with magnets, but different. And it has something to do with the Persinger studies in the 60s. But there's a particular thing there that I really want to try, and we'll see. We'll have this meeting tomorrow, this week, and then we'll see what happens there. But I guess I'm connecting it to the conversation with Sean Carroll. I do want to have one more badge, so to speak. Like I do want to have, aside from the repetition of the laser thing, because this is still very much out there, right? For a physicist, especially for someone like Sean Carroll, is very mainstream. So what I want is something that I can say verbally that will still have an impact even if you've never had the experience. I want to have one more experimental verification of some sort to first before I go and talk to someone like Sean Carroll. Then I definitely will. I didn't know that. That's actually very exciting.
So all of these guys are very fundamental, right? So like, the funny thing is like if you mention to a lot of scientists that you're redoing the double slit experiment, a lot of people will say, why would you do that? It's been done. It's no need to be doing that. But if you get into the weeds of it and you try to do the double slit experiment, it's actually a very difficult experiment. It's actually an incredibly difficult experiment to get right. And if I feel like if you talk to someone like Sean Carroll about the double slit experiment, they are extremely open to that conversation, right? Like that's like a very open door. But even like, the Michelson-Morley experiment with like the ether, a lot of people write that off as like a silly whack job, like experiment. I love that experiment a ton. And even just like the Millikan oil drop experiment, right? Like measuring the mass of an electron, like all these classic experiments should be done. And even in these like altered states where you can now change the observer in the variable of that experiment is such a cool like twist on all of this. But anyways, I'm curious to hear what Rose has to say more than just kind of talking shop physics.
Well, I mean, I love this stuff, and if people, I'll also engage with some questions. You guys can also vote. I mean, you guys can tell us if this is interesting to listen to, or this is something that kind of just make your eyes glaze over. So you let us know. Where did you say he moved now?
So Sean Carroll actually went through there was like a little controversy. So I'll let you in on the tea. But he was trying to get tenured at Caltech, and they didn't give him his tenure. And the reason why he was publishing books and not
not
papers.
teaching enough.
Yeah, he was just kind of more of a celebrity like book guy, and I think he rubbed the department the wrong way. So he was up for tenure and he didn't get it. And from what I heard, he was kind of insulted, and John Hawkins offered him like
I would be
not only a tenureship position, but like a really high level position at John Hopkins University. So a couple years ago, he moved from Pasadena, and it was such a heartbreaking moment for the community.
I didn't even know it was in Pasadena. What?
Yeah, he was down. Yeah, he was in Pasadena. So Yeah, so that was kind of like a loss of the Pasadena community.
Wait,
Because
isn't
he's
Johns
like,
Hopkins in Maryland?
yeah, Maryland, yeah.
So that's not walking to his office. I mean, not for me.
No, no. When he was at
Oh, oh, I
Caltech,
see, I see, I see. Okay.
yeah, you could just walk into his office. Yeah, he was very accessible to that community, and he gave a lot of talks there in Pasadena as well. So
Damn, what an opportunity missed. Okay.
yeah, yeah. But anyways,
That's amazing, man. Yeah, yeah. Oh, there was something I wanted to say, but I forget. Okay, I'll remember while we're exploring other things. But stick around because I know I'll remember in a moment probably. How are you, Rose? Good to see you. Are you there? Yes, I'm here, Dan. Sorry, Rose. 1 second. Let me just respond to one of the. So, guys, everybody on X and YouTube and Twitch. If I'm not responding to you immediately, it means that I'm just in the middle of a conversation. But I definitely will. And I am reading the questions, and at the same time, I'm kind of formulating some. I'm basically batching them in my head and combining them into like more, larger questions that people ask all together. And I do like your question, Dan, about the. You said simulation 84. I mentioned writing code with a Sharpie on the side of a craft. That whole discussion made me think of this pair of incidents. And so if you can just specify what pair of incidents you're talking about, and I would love to answer that question because I do like this. Yeah, just tell me what pair of incidents. Sorry, Rose, I'm with you.
Hi. That was interesting. It's just like so out of my purview of my work, so it's interesting to hear other people talk shop. I also did a temescal like 2 years ago, so
How was
I'm
it?
surprised you're even awake.
You surprised that what?
That you're awake right
Oh
now.
no,
I was
it
well
took
spent.
it took everything out of me, and I had to film too. So
Yeah.
I couldn't just sit. I had to like also film, and I had to focus. And then the last one, when they do this, when they scare you, I was like, oh my god, I almost got a heart attack. I was like, Jesus Christ.
No. I
Oh,
like it though. I'm like notoriously very cold, and so people were, really warning us about how it's going to get so hot, and it's going to be so hot you might pass out. And I was laughing because when it was at its peak, I was like, you know what? I could be warmer.
I can't.
I don't think this is too crazy.
You should live in the sun. You live in the
I know.
wrong.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. Well, anyway, I wanted to let you know I did. I listened to that podcast that you did with the couple. I guess I don't remember what it was called.
Oh, the Soma podcast, which was the first podcast I've ever done, and I really enjoyed it. You guys should definitely
Yeah.
go check it out. Soma, living in the molecule simulation. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was great. And so I now am really up to speed on some questions I was going to ask you had to do with backstory, but then I feel really up to speed on all of that. But I don't know on these live, do you give people a rundown of backstory?
Sometimes, I mean, I have a lot of people that show up every day, so I'm trying not to repeat every single thing like every day, and
Mm.
that's why we kind of go with the flow. Yeah, so not every single day, no, but also the documentary is going to be a lot about that.
Sure.
And more in detail than I ever told anyone because there's what Aaron forced me to do, not with a gun, but with a charming smile. The working on the documentary forced me to kind of really think about what are the exact steps that were taken there, and that was interesting because I did kind of like we had to retrace my steps in a way that actually presented some new hints for me that I actually kind of forgot about, which was interesting.
Yeah.
So because the documentary is going to be talking about that quite a bit, I don't feel that bad, not talking about it every single time.
Hmm. Well, I thought it was interesting, and especially in the story of how it sort of landed on you, the idea of looking at the color red, noticing its vibrancy, and thinking like, oh, I mean, is this not the full spectrum of, am I potentially not seeing a full spectrum of light during, is this more real? And just for context, if anybody doesn't know, why would you know? But if anybody doesn't know what's the deal with me, I'm a Master's of Theological Studies candidate at Harvard, and I reached out to Danny to sort of chat with him more about what's happening with psychedelics research in academia and Harvard specifically right now, it's a very interesting time. And thinking about that, just that question of, am I not seeing the full picture, seems to be such a divinity school question. Seems to be like the source of a lot of people's beginning of inquiry in their research in all kinds of different directions in divinity and theological studies. Just that notion out of a mystical experience, a psychedelic experience, or whatever. Just suddenly a sense of, am I not seeing the full picture? Am I not having the full
Yeah, you're not seeing the full gamut of what's possible to see.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that obvious that that's the case?
Well, I don't know for everybody.
You don't know if for everybody it's obvious?
No, I definitely don't even think people who have psychedelic experiences or even mystical experiences wind up pursuing that further. And that's something too, a mystical experience question that's an unpopular question. But just because it's a bit of a bummer, but is there a possibility that and this is like a question for religious folks, it doesn't even matter, but in regards to having a mystical experience or a psychedelic experience that feels like a mystical experience, is there a possibility that one's own expectation affects the experience, and if our consciousness is being projected from us, so that people for whom the Virgin Mary statue, she cries tears of blood, and it's like she does for them, in the sense that anything deeply believed in will appear. Ghost hunters do seem to find ghosts, but you have to almost have like your receptors open to the experience. You have to buy in to being hypnotized.
Right, so that goes to the question, the broadest version of this question is whether or not there's such a thing as an objective reality versus there's just perception, right? That's really the question.
And does something like religion or shared psychedelic experience link perception in a certain way?
I either surprisingly or maybe either surprisingly or not surprisingly at all for most people, I actually land very hard on the side of absolutely there's objective reality. 100%.
So tell me more about, you mentioned this the other day, let's talk about Jesus.
So which is interesting because the comment that I just read by Matthew, he goes by user 53299 whatever. How you doing, man? He says, Danny, they're just hoping you'll walk on water, right? You're total Jesus-tarian bait, dude. So first of all, I'm not really sure. I'm not, at least from the way that your comment is reading, Matthew. Just so you know, it feels a little edgier than your usual comments, at least recently, because I feel like we kind of started maybe a little bit on the wrong foot, but then we got along. So this feels a little bit pokey. I'm not sure if you meant it that way. I don't feel like a bait because I know where I stand on my positions, and I understand that sometimes people project a lot of things, but I also know the difference between who I'm talking with, and at least in the case of Rose, it's very clear to me that this is someone who's very interested in what in fact is going on, and we all have different life trajectories, but I definitely don't feel, if that's what you were referring to, definitely don't feel that I'm speaking to someone who's, let's say, a Jesus freak. Yeah. But I do want to, before we jump to any of these topics, and people on YouTube eat my head and kill me, I do want to answer just a couple of questions, and we'll dive right into that. And I do want to say one word about whether or not there's objective reality or not, and why I think that. Let me see. So first of all, to your Dan, just so you know, on X, if you're posting links, I think that this, I don't know if it's an effect of StreamYard or some other thing, or maybe it's YouTube, but it doesn't allow me to see links. So you said scroll up. I've posted the incident several times. If that's the case, it might have deleted your thing, because all I see from you is when you said test, and then you went, Danny, are you there? Can I enter a question here? And then I saw the comment twice that I asked you what you're referring to. And then you said, Okay, so I don't know why, but it deleted this comments. It's for sure not here. So if you want to try and put it here again, I'm looking at it now and paying attention to what you're saying. So what incidents are you talking about? I understand what you're referring to. He's referring to me speaking that I think that this code can potentially be one of these like very sophisticated kinds of codes that when you instantiate it in an environment, it's so smart that the environment gets a command from it existing in it. So with regular code, you have to put it into 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 a computer, and then the computer translates it to different layers. Then goes all the way to binary, creates a function, and then goes back up the levels. But what if this code is so sophisticated that when you write it in an environment, the environment almost knows what to do now in a different way. So that was what he was referring to, and I can see this. Yes, what you're saying now I can see, Dan. In the meanwhile, let me see if there's anything else that I can answer before we dive into what we're talking about with Rose. Sorry to ask you here. The donation payment went through on October 2nd for the laser. We'll receive an email when it's shipped out. Should be shipped out tomorrow, I think, because we're building new ones, Kyla. Yeah. But yeah, definitely we'll email you right away when it goes out with the tracking number. We got a crazy flood of people ordering lasers, way more than usual because of so we were, I guess, not ready for so many, but we ordered all the parts, and as far as I know, again, I never know if he wants to be mentioned by name, so I'm not mentioning him, but if he does, he'll let me know and I'll say who that is, and I'm deeply grateful for that. But he should be shipping most of them tomorrow, and I'll let you know. And okay, right then. So I don't see any more comments, but I'm looking. And by the way, if you don't manage to put it here, don't get frustrated. Just email me directly, and I will comment on it tomorrow after I read your comment. If you don't manage, so it's lasersimulationx@gmail.com. At Gmalik? Okay, good. Now it answers your question if I'm asleep or not. Maybe I'm already asleep. Gmail.com. Okay, perfect. I will comment on it tomorrow after I read. So first of all, I do think that there's objective reality. I don't think you can actually describe a world. I don't think it's like one of these like, is it or is it not? I don't think it's an option to not have an objective world. I think it's a definition thing. So I think when people meet what people mean, and I can't imagine they can possibly mean anything else because it's just irrational. I think what people mean when it's say it's just perception is that we can never know what the real space is. So all we can ever know is our personal subjective experience of it. That tracks, that's fine. But that's not the same as saying there is no objective reality. Whatever the state is the objective reality. And I think that's important to acknowledge. So even if it is that consciousness is fundamental and it's all there is, and we are just different perceptions of it, and maybe even it is true that to some degree the conscious experience does formulate the next set of rules that then the universe, over time formulates as the thing that makes sense to the most amount of conscious beings, which is essentially what is being suggested technically. Then okay, but that is the objective reality then. That is the truth about the fact of the matter of the universe. And I don't know why people insist of removing the word objective. Maybe they just don't like that there's something that doesn't care about what they personally want right now. I don't know. I can't think of any other reason why people would even think that that's an attractive way of thinking. But anyway, so that's on that point. So I don't think it's possible to describe a world in which there is no objective reality of some sort. If you don't believe me, try and walk through a wall. Good luck with that. Not you, of course.
What I like about that explanation is it's very considerate to human evolution, because there can be, especially in theological studies, a emphasis on modernity and sort of an assumption that human civilizations in the past were using an indigenous religions and spirituality are an unevolved, way of understanding, a pre-science way of understanding the world, and that can obviously, besides being just like pretty racist, it also seems to
wait. What is pretty racist?
It's just the idea that any kind of non-modern, non-science religion or spirituality like has no validity because it's not quote unquote in conversation with modernity. But what you're saying is that human consciousness
The
at any given
Harvard did get to you. Let me tell you that.
yeah, well, we can be, I mean, Protestantism, which is like the foundation of Harvard Divinity School, is unkind to other worldviews for sure. But if it's a collective consciousness at any point in time, then every point of time is valid because that's where the objective reality is for consciousness on the planet at that time. It's like it's a very inclusive view. It's very nice.
Yeah, and I think again, I think that at this point, whenever I mention Deutsch in any context, people just kind of smirk probably if they know me because it sounds like I'm quoting him for everything. I'm sorry, the guy has a lot of good ideas. But I think he also said this best, which is that emergent properties can also be laws of physics. So it's nowhere written that if there's an emerging property that it cannot be uh, deduced, it cannot be broken down and then explained in terms of the sum of its parts, then now this becomes a law of physics. It becomes a regularity in the world that exists, and it is what it is. And even if it's an emerging property, it doesn't make it less fundamental if you cannot go around it anymore. So
Yeah.
in that sense, if the universe didn't have this rule, that conscious beings, let's say that's the case. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying let's say pretend. Let's say the universe started as really what we thought of before, which is just this cold and empty place that doesn't really care about anything. And all of a sudden, somehow, consciousness arose in it, and then somehow consciousness started influencing the physical matter as outside of knowledge and knowing how to move it. Okay, then yes, it is an arising property, but it is now fundamental. And I think that should also be considered. I think this is why when people tend to like really insist that whatever we think it is must always be and always was, that to me is really silly. Like, I mean, you have to stay open to whatever in fact is coming. So
Do you think it was a fundamentally different universe in the past?
there's no reason to think why that it would be impossible. I think okay, so the only thing I can say with certainty is that we truly not only don't really have a way to ever know. That like that's the truth, right? And I maybe people find these statements vacuous. Thank you so much, Corey. I appreciate you. Very kind of you. Um, but to me, they're important because you might not see it now, but at some point, whatever is true will be part of what you would call salvation of some sort. So if God wants us to do certain things, if God is real and God wants us to do certain things, hey, we should probably take this seriously, right? But if God is just a tool of humans to control one another and to inflict fear on one another, then maybe we want to know that and not take it too seriously. So whatever the truth is important. In either case, it's important, I think. So even if it's not clear why it's relevant to say things that might never have anything to do with our lives, I think for the sake of the future of future humans and future existence in general, we have the obligation to stay as honest as possible to what we can say with any amount of certainty and what we can't say with any amount of certainty. And if something seems to be so far removed from us and yet so obviously true, like there's no such there's not a possible description of any kind of world without some objective layer that is all it means is that something is true. It's important to say that. That's where I always land.
Do you ascribe to the idea that reality is created through conscious, not just consciousness, but almost like conscious expectation?
I think that reality is
what
consciousness.
believes.
At this point, I'm the closest I think to idealism, which is that the mind is the universe.
The mind is the universe.
The universe.
And do you believe in, or not believe, I mean, but would you say that your experience with the code, for example, or even before, because I know you were interacting with the molecule for, it sounds like years before, do those experiences lend themselves, like, does that lend more credence to that understanding? Is that something you felt before? Is that something that was influenced by this? Like
specifically, what was influenced specifically by that? By the perception that the universe is mind.
And not just that the universe is mind, but that it's similar to. And look, I don't know a thing about video games, but I so correct me if I'm saying something insane, but I understand that there is a popular video game. I don't even know what it's called, but where the code of the game is not fully complete, but by playing the game, people are like building worlds.
Oh yeah, what is it called? GTA 6. No, what is it called? Come on. Where's Kel when we need him with the names? I'm also forgetting with the bricks, right? With the blocks. What is it called?
I have absolutely no idea. Wait, is it Minesweeper or Minecraft?
Minecraft.
Oh, okay, that's not even what I was thinking, but is that what Minecraft
Thank you.
is?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I don't even know that.
And No
No,
Man's Sky.
guess
By
I
the
was
way, this is a
thinking
really good. So Chavez, just said on YouTube, the No Man's Sky, and that's interesting because
okay, I
that
think that's
game,
what I'm thinking of.
yeah, it has like like 100 million variations or something, but they don't all exist. So when people play, it
Yeah.
automatically fills it in. Yeah, so it's No Man's Sky.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the one I had heard of. I guess I don't know what Minecraft is, but the the idea of that not only is consciousness the point of reality, meaning like the where it exists, that the consciousness is universe, but that it's creating it, that it's possibilities until they're sort of collapsed into existence, right, by like collective focus or even individual focus. Though that sort of
Yeah, yeah, but I don't think it's actually my interaction with the code and the aliens that gave me the certainty about that. It's just actually I was basically not argued into it, but I was convinced by an argument into it. So
I'd love to know about that.
by Bernardo Kastrup, yeah. So basically, he's kind of like the most modern proponent of the idealistic position, and he's pretty smart guy, double PhD, was a computer scientist, had worked at CERN, I had a high tech company, and now he just his second PhD was in philosophy, and he kind of revived the whole idea of idealism to fit a more modern frame, and he uses a lot of very concrete arguments from things that we do know for sure. I'll give you two examples. One of them is that there are. So okay, so first the actual claim is that it's not quite the same as panpsychism that postulates that there is some layer of reality that contains consciousness, like a quantum field or something, and it combined with other things that we call physical matter gives rise to creatures like us. It's not that argument. Is that mind is actually the substrate out of which everything is made, and then what you see is the physical world is the third person perspective of the universal mind, just like the brain that we see in other people is the third person perception of what the mind looks like from the outside, from a disassociative boundary. So we are disassociated bubbles inside a universal mind, and through this associative boundary, things look like a physical thing, but they're just regularities of the mind, of the larger mind. And so this is the claim. And two examples. He uses a lot of different arguments, but two really good examples are. The first one is that there are recorded cases of people with multiple personality disorder that, let's say they have 5 alters, which is what they call the different personalities, and when these people were investigated after dreaming a dream, in some cases the 5 different alters, when they were present, they reported the same dream from their own perspectives, but what was interesting is that they reported seeing the other alters in the dream. So they couldn't see them. They clearly can't see them when they're awake and in the same body, because they always think they're the only one. But in the dream, they could see each other. And doesn't that remind you of something? So that's one example. And the other thing is that he uses. You remember
and that's
that
common for people.
not common, but you don't need it common. You need it once. If you know it's possible to happen. No, I think it's recorded more than once. I don't remember exactly. I think there were a few cases, but in order to make the argument work, you only need it to happen once. Because if it's possible, you can then say, well, what if we are these disassociative boundaries of the universal mind, and it's just layers, right? The other argument he uses is that you remember that picture that came out in, I think, 2012. There was a meme that came out that had on one side a picture of neural connections of neurons,
Yes.
and then the other side was the megastructure of the universe, and they looked the same, right? You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So some people, obviously, most scientists immediately brushed it off as like, come on, this is an image. Let's not get silly here. Okay. So apparently there's this Italian researcher that ran a mathematical analysis on it. And he looked at it from a topological perspective. And what he discovered is that they're almost equivalent from a topological perspective. Mathematically, they're almost the same. He ran it in all kinds of dimensions of comparison. So it might not be just a happenstance that they look the same. And the interesting intricacy there about that argument, which I personally like, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true, of course, but I like that little intricacy, that it's possible that the universal mind doesn't have self-awareness, because, one second, it asked me to solve a puzzle in the middle to make sure that I'm not a robot. It doesn't have self-perception because in order to have self-perception, you need to have a perception of something that is not you. But in the case of the universal mind, it doesn't have an external environment by definition. It is everything there is. And because of that, it doesn't have outwards pointing vectors, and therefore no implied inwards pointing vectors. Therefore, it doesn't have self-awareness. It's just aware of, but not of something like we call the self. There's just awareness, pure awareness. And it might also be the case that because thought, in order for thoughts to happen about, especially about yourself, there needs to be some kind of a loop happening in the brain, some self-reference of some kind. But if the limitation of the speed of light inside the universe is real, which we have every reason to think it is, then maybe the universe is still thinking its first thought. And it didn't have enough time to complete backwards loop to even formulate one self-referencing frame. So it never actually became aware that it is a thing, but it is becoming aware in smaller units like ourselves, because it has a faster feedback loop that can do that. And then through us, it literally is waking up to the fact that it's all conscious. And it sounds like something ripped out of some new age book, but it's put in very concrete terms and mapped onto, with a very logical frame, on what we already know to be true, which consciousness is real, these two examples and many other examples that he gives. But I think he formulates the most coherent case for it. And I think that the reason that it stands as a more valid way of looking at it is simply because of the fact that it only asks you to postulate one miracle versus two, which is something that Donald Hoffman says very often. Like currently through the physicalist perspective, we ask people to entertain the idea that first of all, everything came out of nothing, the Big Bang, one miracle, and then we're asking them to believe that somehow from inert physical matter, all of a sudden consciousness just magically appears, and there's not even an inkling of a beginning of a mechanism to be proposed of how it can possibly be true, right? But in this case, you collapse one of the miracles. You say, I'm only asking you to postulate that consciousness just exists, but then you don't have the problem of the Big Bang, because the Big Bang would just be a regularity inside of the perception of the universal mind. So you now only have one major problem and not two. And I think that's actually a good enough of a reason. And combined with the fact that the only thing you truly know, and this is something that a lot of people have a hard time taking on board, but the only thing you truly know is that you're conscious. That's it. You don't even know if the universe is real, but you know for a fact that consciousness is possible because you have it, and that's it. You don't need any other verification for that.
Well, and as it relates to, first of all, as you were talking, I've pulled up Bernardo Kastrup Reddit, so that's the rest of my night, so thanks for that. But the relevancy, I think, for divinity studies, for theological studies, is how then do people with loaded with information through this mode or through mystical experience or through religion, how then to make meaning? And that might be too broad of a question, but I know you've been interacting with entities, and then maybe this is a good like way to wrap in your like very very provocative statement from a couple of days ago of that maybe Jesus is an intentional, what did you say, like a
Folded
part of
into.
it folded into, yeah.
Well, I call him a function, which offends a lot of Christians, but
That's okay. Hey, you know what, everything offends a lot of Christians, and they could take a seat for a minute.
yeah. My favorite is when they come on, and again, they're usually very nice, but it's really funny because when it gets to the thing, they just get very serious and go, "But come on, like, come on, you don't want to burn in hell, right? Come on, so come on,
Oh my
let's just."
God, I
So
know.
basically, they don't say it, but they basically like threatened you, essentially. Like literally,
Right.
it literally sounds like the mob. It's like, "Hey, you want to join the right club, you know?" It's like I'm like, how do you not understand this is the most condescending and threatening thing you can possibly do? Like, just chill. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an inflexible worldview at a certain point for sure, and it doesn't hold up to a lot of scrutiny. So yeah, it kind of it can be a little defensive for
So,
sure.
so
So
go ahead.
tell me then, well, what do you, and try to answer succinctly. Just kidding. This is an insane question.
Explain
So big,
Jesus. Go.
what about meaning? What
Yeah,
about
meaning. I
these
think
are
the
the
meaning
divinity
is.
school
I think
questions?
meaning is the actual universal currency. It's the only thing that, if you think about it for 2 seconds, it's the only thing that can possibly matter in the grand scheme of everything, everything. Because it's not. It's only question of how you get there, right? If you look at any single thing in existence, in our existence, in even in any postulated existence, the only thing that can matter is meaning. Because the fear of death, the feeling of it is meaning. So it can be a little tricky because you have to talk about the definition of the meaning of the word meaning, right? Which is kind of like the ultimate self-referencing thing. But what I mean by meaning is the essence of whatever it is you're putting your attention on. And it came to me actually in an Aya ceremony when I talked about it actually in the podcast that you listened to, where I looked at the red cloth,
Right.
and I realized that it was more red. Now, I was very experienced with psychedelics already, so it's not a new experience for me. But in that moment, all of a sudden, it hit me. I was like, wait, why do things look more vibrant like that? Because we call it more vibrant, but it's not more vibrant. It's not the vibrancy of it that I'm seeing. And also, I know there's no more photons coming into my eyes. So why is it more red? And then I had a thought. I was like, wait a second. What if what these things do, they're a meaning aperture? They expand the aperture of how much meaning of something you can perceive. And I'm telling you this part of the story to try and to make you understand what I mean by the word meaning. The meaning of red is how red it is. It's the essence of itself. So if you see more of the meaning of red, it will be redder by definition, because the quality of red is what the meaning of it is. And at least at the moment, that sounds like the ultimate tautology. And what are you even talking about? Because we think of everything in terms of contrast. People tend to say, well, you only know what's good because you experience bad. I don't think so. I think if you would come into being this second, you would still know the difference between something that feels good and feels bad, because there's an essence to it.
Well, and you're sort of in my work here a little bit, since I do birth spirituality studies, and there are a lot of there's a lot of interesting work being done with what are the ethics of when we're newborns, when we're babies. When does ethics like land naturally in the body? Is it pre-language? When does somebody make a decision not to cause pain, essentially? A big question that is being answered right now is like, are babies, when we're babies, are we sociopaths? Are we psychopaths? And when does that change? And people are on both sides of that. I wouldn't presume to say, but I'm very interested in exactly that.
Yeah. So I'm very much along those lines, but essentially I just wanted to illustrate what I meant by the word meaning with that, and that is It's just the essence of the thing. And this is why when you do these substances, you see all these deeper connections, because you see deeper into what they really are. And no, not in the uh, way of like breaking it down into parts and understanding what it's made out of, but what is it in its most essential component. So what is a human? What is the essence of a human? What is the essence of that particular human? You all of a sudden see to the core, to the what that person really is, right? And the same thing with colors, and the same thing with concepts, and the same thing with everything. So everything that is in the world, it has this one thread of what I call meaning. And the ultimate meaning is the self-referencing element that is only referencing to itself from the beginning to the end. So it's the only thing that goes from alpha to omega without referring to anything else but itself, and that would be God. So that is the ultimate meaning. So if you ask yourself, what is the ultimate essence that does not refer to anything else ever, but everything else aggregates around it? It's like the ultimate column, right? That is the deepest meaning, because it's the purest meaning, and that would be God in my version of it.
And when people, or maybe not people, but when you as an individual interact with this idea and also like consult the entities that you're interacting with on DMT, are you finding that it's more important to understand God? This is a big, and again, this is going to be a big divinity school question, but is it more important to understand the nature of God to you, or is it more important to understand, essentially to like look under the hood and see how the car works, or is it more important to you that people, regardless of how an internal combustion engine works, know how to drive, know how to live?
Yeah, I understand your question very well. I think the answer to that is we're living it. I think that's the question God asked herself. I think that existence is the answer unfolding.
And what then is the role of, how does God become important then? It
can't have importance, because it is, it just is. It's the ultimate isness. It's just I don't like usually to use these terms, because they're kind of, unless you've experienced these things, they're a little vacuous. But the closest I can get is, so I think of it in terms of a game, right? So if you wake up to the reality that you're the only thing that exists, and you know this without a shadow of a doubt, and you also know that you can do anything, so which means everything is meaningless, that is kind of the worst possible scenarios. Because it's the ultimate loneliness and the ultimate meaninglessness. So it's a level of agony and pain that I always say. So I've exchanged this note a few times with some friends of mine that had a similar experience, and basically in it we've kind of, I've had it, and a few people that I know have had it, and I'm sure that some people here on the chat had it, where you go there and you see that, and you see that without.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it is extremely painful. Yeah.
So then I always say we always want God's compassion, but we never ask ourselves, do we have compassion for God? Because God's grace is that you get to go to sleep and you get to die. And in the context of that, I thought, well, what would be the most rational, which God absolutely would be, what would be the most rational move from that position after you kind of pick yourself up from that understanding? I think it would be to try.
Allison, welcome back. Sorry, I'm just reading these comments. Allison, huge welcome.
Who? Sorry.
She said, I just left Mormonism. I
Got it. Welcome. Oh, thank you for reading some of the comments. I'm having a hard time reading at the same time, paying
Yeah,
attention.
me as well. But that one that's a major, yeah, that's huge.
I have a good friend who also left of Mormonism, and his wife is still in it. It's actually a very difficult situation.
Yeah, that sounds.
But they're making it work. So
anyway, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I do appreciate it that you read some of the comments. So I figured that there's two rational moves to make from that position. Either you understand why, and you put all of your resources to try and do that, or because it might bring you some catharsis, right? Or you just learn how to just be. And it seems like, why would God pick one? Why wouldn't God just try and do both at the same time? So God broke herself into infinite pieces to not remember that that's the case, because it's an unfathomably painful state. And in that time, all these little pieces have codes in them that tell them to lean towards one of these attitudes. One is to understand, and the other one is more Eastern in nature, which is just be. Just it doesn't matter, just be. Because it's true that if you can just be in love forever, then you're good. On the other hand, it's also interesting to maybe also know why. And that knowing might bring you some closure, right? So both attitudes are playing out, and I don't even think that these are the yin and the yang. I actually think both of them break into the yin and the yang. They both have the yin and the yang version. Mm-hmm. That the dark version is always the one that's like short circuit, only referring to itself as much as possible. And then the white version is kind of like the longer the arc, the whiter it is. The white in the sense of the yin and the yang, like the light, right? And now it goes without saying that even though I know what it feels like to be convinced that that's the case, it's something that I actually told the friends that I was exchanging these notes with, which by the way they didn't like. they're very adamant about no, that is the case. I'm like, well, you don't know that, because in the end of the day, you did experience this still from the position of being you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to talk about it. So it's possible that also it's just like it was like a glitch, and a unit experienced the state of God, but God does not experience it this way. It's also possible. But to the extent that there is validity to this experience, I think this is the thing that makes the most sense to me. And then God would ask the question, and then literally kind of like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, only in this case, it's not the Earth, it's existence itself. It's the multiverse that it's the answer collecting itself. And at the end of this process, so in this sense, God is an almost perfect object. Because if you think about it, something perfect would contain all the opposites of itself, and therefore just cancel itself out, and therefore not occur, right? So the only way for anything to exist, it must have some flaw, the smallest thing that is not exactly perfect for it to exist, right? So that one flaw is the not knowing why. And the vision that I saw is that at the end of this process, that last picosecond, whatever it is, in which the final answer hits God and goes like, oh, like it knows why. At that moment, it or she becomes perfect, and therefore ceases to not just exist, but retroactively cancels itself from ever to have been existed. So nothing ever happened. So and that is one of the possibilities. And the other possibility is that it learned how to achieve nirvana, like all of the beings everywhere, which is the aggregation of what the ultimate mind is, learned how to just be. And that's the other possibility. But as long as there's a competition between the attitudes, there's always friction and happening, and therefore it can never complete the circle. So before you comment, the vision in which I saw Jesus.
Yes. Okay. Good. Okay.
Yeah. And this is where I'm only gonna say some of it because I know people hate me for this. I'm sorry, but I can either say nothing or I can say at least something. The reason that I don't say the last part is because I'm not sure I'm supposed to. I might just need to live with that. But what I saw is that something is occurring at the central stage and in the center stage of existence. So everybody are looking, everybody. And something happens there of that significance. And a timer is being put and something is unfolding. And in that time, everything in existence needs to make a decision. And in that process, one of the elements was Jesus ascending. And there was no mistaking that. He was there. And then, but something much bigger is unfolding. And then that something is basically the thing around which the choice is. And we are all a version, a tiny atom of the ultimate answer. Of what do we choose? And it's not like anybody knows what the right answer is.
Well, I mean, it's a lot to. I'm still even on the point about how to have. Does anybody have empathy for God? Does anybody acknowledge in an awakening what a devastating. Why perhaps God went to sleep in the first place? And where, like, again, and then even jumping back further to just think about meaning making, because regardless of your state of awakening, you still are embodied, you still have a life. And I think at the end of the day, this is what religious studies people, barring the people who study the history of religion, that's kind of its own thing, but religious studies, people who are hoping to enter ministry or hoping to, be guides or leaders or thought leaders or writers in this realm, want to answer is how can people make meaning from their own life experience? And does knowing about the code, for example, does knowing about a simulation that one cannot escape from, does an awakening that still doesn't end the simulation? It's not like you have a spiritual awakening and then sort of the veil is lifted and you're like, you got it. Okay, so now here's the answers to everything, and that was the ultimate goal. The goal might be to make life meaningful, and these are all different routes. A spiritual awakening or not, worship practice or a life of crime, whatever your meaning making is that the goal? Like, is that did God go to sleep to make meaning? Does that make sense?
Yes. No, meaning is just again, like I said, it's the ultimate currency. Because it's the only thing that matters. If you produce all the possible wealth, that everybody has enough food, enough time to do whatever they want and all of that, the only thing that would matter to them is how much meaning they feel. When you have sex, you feel meaning. When you eat good food, you feel meaning. When you're close to death, you feel meaning. When you're escaping DEATH, I can't say these words too often, they're going to flag the chat for some reason. Everything is about meaning, all of it. Relationships, like if you look closely, everything is about meaning at the bottom. Now you have physical needs that you need to fulfill, otherwise you're not going to survive. But even those are riding on top of a tapestry of meaning. The way that language is produced is through this like influx of meaning of some sort that then pushes you to either say something or express something. It's all meaning. That is the substance out of everything, is that everything is made. And I actually think that, and well, it actually connects to something that people just asked in the last, these two comments that I think are actually important. One of them, by Chair Bear, how are you certain that the vision wasn't based on preconceived notion? And the other one was, do you think God is a human? Why are you saying he or she? So to the second question, which is a little easier to answer, but why am I saying he or she? I was more surprised probably than anyone, because in my mind I would never imagine, why would God have a gender? Like God, it obviously it's some kind of an it, right? It's some kind of a thing that is beyond comprehension. But at least in the vision that I was shown, and yesterday I was trying to explain a little bit the difference between the different kinds of visions that appear in these things. And to me, there's a particular type of vision. I don't even want to call it vision. It's just basically an announcement from administration. So it's kind of like, this is officially from Apple. Like, this is not some hacker saying this. No, this has a stamp on it. Okay. So this was one of these. Now, you can still say, well, maybe this is some kind of a game they're playing with you. Sure, of course. But under the banner of taking anything to any degree of seriousness, I'm kind of obligated to take the stamp one a little more seriously than anything else. So all of this is prefaced by, to the extent that I'm taking this message seriously, the ultimate, all the way at the top, it's not an it, it's a she. And by the way, big surprise, the biblical God is there, just not at the top. And I don't know what to make of it. I'm literally just reporting, with the caveat to the first question, how do I know this is not based on some preconceived notions? Of course I don't. Also, do I think that it's this kind of like a caricature structure? Of course not. But it's probably, if it does have any merit to it, that is the closest they can probably communicate to the mind like ours, right? They have to put it in terms that we kind of understand.
Sure.
And this is why I call Jesus a function, because if I have to think of it in universal terms, he serves a function. Like that function of taking everybody's karma, because people can't be perfect. So instead of, whatever the system is, and however, I don't know why that would be the case, but let's say it is the case, that somehow you fall into infinite suffering if you don't behave a certain way, then you would have, if that's the case, you would have to create some kind of a thing. If you have compassion and you have any control over it, you would have to create some kind of a solution to this. This is the only thing that I can think of that made sense to me. You would have to think of some kind of a function that almost like takes, like it took your karma on itself, and it performed the ultimate suffering for everybody, because it could. So you don't have to. And then the only thing you have to do in return is to acknowledge that happened for you. That's it. And you're off the hook. I know it sounds simplistic, but that's the only thing that made sense in terms of if that is in fact the case. That would be a scenario that makes sense to me. And what I'm saying now is that there's some kind of a new deal that was struck, basically. So now it's like Jesus is off the hook, and now new system is coming. The new system, we share our karma. So it's a more mature level. So we kind of we grow in the level, and now we are responsible, but we're responsible not individually, but collectively. So we have to collectively get our shit together, versus just every individual, which is technically impossible. So how do I know it's not based on preconceived notions? I don't. I'm just telling you what I saw from everything I've ever seen, with the most amount of coherent. I wasn't like in a trance. It was literally just like a diagram, like arrows, slow. Here's what this is. Here's what that is. This is how this works. You wanted to know, right? they're saying to me, here's how it works. And that was part of that vision. So now, what do I personally make of it?
Yeah.
My whole life.
Can you speak to what, even if you don't want to say, can you speak to why you feel like there's something you're not supposed to say?
Because I think we all have some function to play, and I'm not sure of it yet, but my function might be to know something nobody else does, so nobody else needs to know.
You have to tell me.
Yeah. So I'm not even sure that the thing itself is let's just say the coin was been flipped, and I don't think the coin has landed yet. So the coin doesn't know if it's heads or tails. So it's not like there's even a thing to know, but the occurrence itself, the flipping of the coin, is the thing that I'm not talking about. Because I don't, and even everything I said so far, in order to get to this place of saying all of that, I first had to kind of test this with like smaller groups where I had to feel what's happening inside of me with every new word that's coming out of my mouth. And the reason that I said everything I said right now is because all of these things passed the test of how it feels. So if I started speaking about it and all of a sudden it felt like kind of like, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to talk about that.
Okay.
And then other things that came more naturally and they actually kind of elevate the spirit, these are the ones that I am expressing. So that's kind of how I learned what I'm technically maybe supposed to talk about or not supposed to talk about. And this is to the point of like where I land on all of this. I'm a hard head. Like it's very difficult to crack. Like I'm very stubborn. And I'm even stubborn with them. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's just how it is. So like sometimes they would do something like that, and I'd be like, and I would be very like, okay, look, if you don't want me to talk about this, maybe you shouldn't show me. It's like I talk about things. It's what I do. So, and then I'm learning. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes obviously they understand what each person is good at and likes to do. So usually a lot of the stuff that comes naturally to people will also be, it's almost like a carrier. It's for something, right? It's almost like that's your gift to the universe, and you're supposed to express that in the best way you can possibly do it. But part of it is also the responsibility, the other side of it. And I think the responsibility part I never liked in my life. So as I mature, I guess both as a person and spiritually, but the more I understand this whole element of responsibility. And
well,
I
your
think
curiosity then comes with responsibility. You could stop looking, but you won't stop looking.
Yeah, that part I never understand. And this is why I always say to all the Jesus people, which is like, look, even though with everything that I saw, and I'm saying this also to them always, which is like, look, this is if you want to, I don't know if that's the case, but if you want to tell me that the situation is such that you get to a certain level and then okay, but this is, you're not supposed to know beyond this point. It's like, I don't know what that means. It's like you either allow for something to be known or no. But if it's possible to know that, you can't possibly punish anybody for figuring it out. That's crazy. Right?
This is Genesis. I mean, this idea of the temptation is like built into.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like what is this game? What is this for? And no, I'm not on board with this. And if that means that I'm supposed to pay some kind of a price, okay. Well, but like it doesn't make any sense to me. Like when I search in myself since I was a little kid, knowledge was like it is the divine. It's like knowing something is connecting to it. Is connecting to that part of the world. People think that knowledge is always coming from this place of trying to control. it's true that often humans slide to that modality, but I don't think that's the case. It's not the case for me. If I understand something, it feels like a connection. It feels like a beautiful moment, right? And that's where I'm operating from, and that's where I always operated from. So if you get to a certain point and all of a sudden that thing is now not allowed to be known, then don't make it such that it's known. It's possible to know. Like, what is this silly game? So this is why I stand on it personally, right? So I would definitely, if I have to place myself where I would be in these two modalities that God is playing, I'm definitely part of the the side that wants the civilization to expand into the galaxy and beyond. I want us to know, I want us to expand, I want us to understand. And part of that understanding is understanding ourselves, understanding the divine element of the universe, how to express science in a more divine manner, how to have technology that is informed by the sacred versus just functional. So a civilization that builds beautiful things that are inspired by the divine, but is a technological civilization that understands the universe better. That's how I see it. Other people don't see it that way. It seems to be a very much like a big fashion now. A lot of people to kind of lean much more into the whole hippie thing and just like Earth is our home. We're gonna tend to her home. Uh, I think it's the other way around. I think we've stayed long enough. I think it's a situation where either you want to use the womb metaphor and then we're overstaying and now we're actually endangering the mother because at some point you gotta go. Like, okay, you it's time to be birthed. Let's go. Or you can use the home metaphor in which if your parents kind of look at you funny and you're 28 and they're like, when is he gonna get his own place? You know what I mean? It's like, come on. Like, it's like, yeah, it's home, but you leave home eventually. You go explore. It's what life is doing. It's not just humans, it's what life is doing. So at the moment, we're the cutting edge of life here, and it's our job to let's go. That's how I see it.
Do
And
you think, do you feel that there's another camp that could be less interested in, because if there are two camps, I may be in a different camp, less interested in going, less interested in exploring and understanding. I don't relate to that as a kid, but really occupied with making life meaningful and an interest in anything having to do with the function of the universe or the secrets of the universe have so much less to do with knowledge for the sake of knowing and expanding, and more knowledge for the sake of operating more successfully, so that lived lives can become more joyful, meaningful, productive. And I don't obviously mean productive in a capitalistic sense, but productive for one's individual sense of purpose. Are there ways to live that understanding consciousness will help people live more effectively, less violently, less neurotically, less pain? Is that anyone's objective? Is that God's objective?
no, I think it's the objective of both. They just believe that there's two different ways to achieve it. I
So
don't think there's two different ways to achieve it. I think that both of these games are played at the same time. I think that you will always have people that will stay home and tend to home and make it more and more beautiful, while others will go and explore. And these projects are not mutually exclusive. It always has been the case.
Well,
By
I
the way,
think the
again, not for
explorers,
the one.
like what interests me about your work, or what I think the explorers do well, is they provide more and more insight and context to natural laws so that people can live ultimately more effectively. Like, I'm very interested in what you're saying about, well, wait, I have to pull his name up again. My computer went dark. Bernardo Kastrup. I'm gonna be all into idealism tonight.
I'll send you a really good talk by him on a little small podcast because he has a lot of great talks. But I'll send you a relatively short conversation with him that I think encapsulates a lot of these ideas that I think like really packaged really nicely from all these talks. I'll send you that one.
Well, when thinking about like the laws of the universe, the way the universe functions, that people are observing and doing scientific method to learn deeper and deeper. I'll think of like gravity functions like this, and so people can achieve more and more in basketball and in sports and in gymnastics, because we're literally manipulating gravity in more sophisticated ways. And I asked a sports friend of mine recently, like, because basketball players keep getting better and better at basketball, are we gonna fly someday? Are we just gonna keep like
The rise
when,
of
when
Superman.
does it? Maybe, and he said, I don't know. I mean, if it's exponential, like what? Maybe, I don't know. He didn't like the question really, but
The one thing I will contend with is that I think that when people say we're doing this for something else, I think that it's either a lie of lack of awareness. We're never doing it for any of these reasons. We're always doing it because of how it makes us feel. That's it. So I know that. So if I when I like that moment of understanding, it's not to achieve something. It's just for that moment. It feels really good in my body, and I think that's why everybody are doing what they're doing. They have a story about a more grandiose function, but that's just once again about how it makes them feel in the moment when they say that. But it's all about how you feel in the moment. So when people connect to the things that they're predisposed to connect to, what they're confusing it with is the story. And even people that are extremely positive players, that how can you ever say that somebody who's only interested in toiling the land and connecting to the environment and growing plants and being kind to humans, how can you ever say that they're doing anything that is of a negative nature? Well, you can say, if you zoom out for a second in time and realize that if they just do that, eventually the sun will eat the earth. And if you don't do any of the technology, you'll just be engulfed with the earth. So eventually you will have to pass the intelligence test, that way or another. You can sing Kumbaya all day, you'll be engulfed with the sun. The point isn't that there's one modality that is the correct one, is that all of these modalities are celebrations of what is possible in the universe. So the second that people confuse that and they think it's a zero-sum game, people who say, why are we going to Mars when there's so many problems here to fix? That's an extremely myopic view. It's confusing the enterprise. It's not like because you're doing stuff here, because somebody's going to Mars, it's going to stop people from doing stuff here. That's not what's going on. In fact, the more you expand your horizons and try to understand something else, and by the way, these people do it just because they're called to do it. They just feel good. They like to explore. But because they're going to do that, you're going to learn a lot about what you can do for the environment here. Because if you have to terraform a whole planet, now you're going to understand enormous things that you would never understand just being here, right? So and vice versa. So all I'm saying is that we should always celebrate these attitudes that we all want to act out. And I think the confusion is when people start doing the what should we do more, and they waste time arguing about it, when in reality, just do the thing you really love. And the actual natural state of affairs of what needs to happen more will come through you and will come through humanity, versus like arguing about what is the more correct thing to do.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And definitely that, anytime I drive over a bridge or something, I think, thank God somebody is an engineer and knows how to do a bridge, because I need this bridge, but I'm never going to be called to figure out how to do a bridge. So I totally understand, but I still have a question about why. And I'm asking you not even as a person to person, but as somebody who I feel my belief system is that you have a direct line to to information, and it sounds like you found a direct line because you are an adventurer and you're curious enough to go looking for it, and then we all have the benefit of thank God for your insane curiosity.
No, but we all have that line. It just comes to us in different ways.
Yes, but your line to this information, I think, the Mars example is a good example of, now you have information to bring back so that those who are not adventurers, those who are not inherently explorers, people who do not feel their sense of purpose to know more, can understand how to make their lives more meaningful by knowing more intricate information about how the universe functions, not to know it, but to activate it and then have a better life experience. Is that making sense?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to life experience. As long as you really enjoy yourself, everything else doesn't really matter. And I would even go as far as to say, even though I definitely fall in the camp of the people who think we should go and explore, and because I personally enjoy it, I would say that if we live a life that every single human lived the best life possible for the longest possible time that humanity could live, and then you would say that the price for that is that you have to die with your star, I would say, okay, that's a coherent argument. I wouldn't agree with that because I think we are infinite beings and we should keep expanding because that's kind of like our destiny. But I can't argue with that position, with that other position. It's like if you truly believe in like in your body that that's the best possible way to do it, okay, I accept it. We just disagree, but I that's not a thing I would ever argue with. People just argue out of like they just didn't think of it enough. They just think of like they just think here right now, which is actually very. How does the what does the line goes? Uh, Good people do plant trees that they know they will never sit under. It's not just about you right now. So it's like I don't know. I guess it's a matter of I guess how zoomed out your perception is. And by the way, it doesn't. One of it is not better than the other. If you're too zoomed out, then you can't focus on anything here at all, and you're not even enjoying yourself. So in that sense, you're diminishing enjoyment in the universe too, right? But some people can't help it. Like when my fiance always points it out to me. She says, "You have to stop. You have to stop saying the word the world." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Because when you say the world, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Everything that exists." She's like, "Yes. When people hear the word the world, they think Earth." I'm like, "Oh, so that's the difference." So when I say the world, I mean everything that exists and can possibly exist. But that's not what on most people's minds. And so there's different people with different predispositions of to focus on certain things. People mentioned here basketball in some context, I don't know, but some people just really enjoy doing that. And we really enjoy watching them doing that because they're really good at it, right? And that goes for about everything. So the only thing I guess I'm saying that I think that might have value, which is that it really is not a zero sum game. We can just everybody can just focus on what they really want to do, and now we have the opportunity to do so. We no longer have to kind of toil endlessly and to just keep doing the thing, and it's like just like it has to drag, and we have to find water, and we have to no, we don't have to do that anymore. But we can find new levels of meaning, and we need a bigger challenge. And people say, well, how far do you want to take it? Again, it's not about how far. It's just part of the natural process because it's possible in the universe. This whole idea that it's unnatural, no, it's part of the universe, so it's natural.
But there are these mistakes. I don't want to say mistakes, but there are these traumas that generation after generation repeats until there's a knowledge breakthrough. There's electricity, there's potable water, there's agriculture, and then we don't, and then we, advance. And so by having access to technology, especially the technology that seems like you are talking about having direct access to, my question is still, what lesson, I don't want to say lessons, but like what information can you, while continuing to follow the natural curiosity that's like bringing you to the telephone that you can pick up and listen, like you found it because of your interior world, like drove you to it. But now that you have that, we talked about responsibility earlier, now that you have information, what can you share? What looking backwards do you have to share, if anything, that will help people in this iteration, in this life experience, have a more meaningful and peaceful is everybody's ultimate goal, peace or loving or trauma-free life experience, 80, 90 years. Not thinking about humanity, not thinking about the world.
I'm not sure that I know what it is yet. If I have to be honest, I'm not sure that it's clear to me what we can do with it yet that will actually make our lives better. All I'm following is the knowing that anything that is true is worth knowing, because ultimately all evils are due to insufficient knowledge, always.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
So if something is true, you don't necessarily have to automatically see how you can apply it. Knowing the fact that it's really, really true about the world is by itself a value. And I always give the very simple example of quantum physics, but it's true of everything. When quantum physics was discovered, it was never clear to anybody that it will ever apply to anything that has to do with our lives. Everybody thought it would just become some theoretical stuff. But within less than a decade, it literally transformed the world. So is that going to be the same? I don't know. But I know that it's always the case that when you know less, you're more of a nuisance from the standpoint of all the other creatures that surround you.
So then what do you know? Like what, so far, besides that there's a code, what do you know? What do you know that we don't know yet?
I don't necessarily think that I'm the only one who knows it. I think I've interacted with a lot of people that know it in different ways. And they really know it. Like, they don't just say it. I can see in their conviction and the way that they speak that they definitely know it. It just comes to them in a different way. So first of all, I know that it expresses itself to different people in different ways. I know that there's different kinds of worlds that are trying to come through. It's not one. And they're all kind of like, almost like passing through us at the moment. And exactly how it's going to unfold for each and every one of us, it's a little bit of an insignificant question because of what you said in the beginning. So I'm going to take you back to what you said. It is true that to a large degree, your perception will determine what timeline you're going to find yourself in. But I think it has more to do with your compatibility with it versus some kind of a musical chairs game. You understand what I'm saying?
Awareness or belief system will collapse their future into something tangible they enter based on decisions they make now. Is this that?
Yeah, they're signaling what makes sense to them. That's the world they're going to find themselves in.
Yeah, so I see what you mean about it feels like coming from a New Age book or something, but it feels like law of assumption. It feels like Hermetic principles. It feels like, do those hold up to scientific scrutiny, I suppose?
I think science in its current state is the wrong tool, because science in its current state is defined very narrowly as the things that we can only measure, but what is being omitted from that statement is that it's only measured by one modality that we so far devised. But there are other modalities that are possible that are just as valid. And again, David Deutsch was proposing one of them, which is looking at what's possible versus what's impossible, instead of looking at fundamental movements of particles. And that's a much more useful frame.
We're talking about quality of life. That would be a life.
That's part of what's possible and what's impossible. If it's possible for humans to suffer, that's a data point on that spectrum. And then to what degree and why, and what causes the suffering to be at a certain level, how can you prevent suffering? All of that should be part of a scientific investigation at its broadest sense. The way that I see science, capital S science, the way it should be practiced in the ultimate scheme of things, it's the enterprise of human understanding. That's it. And the modality doesn't matter, as long as you understand something that is true about existence. And it doesn't have to be about what you call physical existence. It can be about experiential existence. That's still part of existence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about. It's just interesting. I had like a bigger thought about just the liberal arts in general, and how it's interesting to talk to a scientist, because there's just the approach, just like the fundamental approach. It's not that they're opposing. It's just so different.
As long as you find yourself, not you personally, but the way I see it is that the second that you find yourself resisting something, no matter how tacitly, in my opinion, you're in the wrong modality for sure. So like I always say, like for example, yes, I'm much leaning more like towards everything I said, right? Technology, moving to space, like I'm very excited about all the new innovations. I see it as a beautiful thing, with all its dangers and everything. Um, but I'm super happy that people love nature in the most kind of like caricature version of that, which is like the people who like love to toil the land and like the wholesome people, right? Salt of the earth people. I That's not me, okay? But I love the fact that people are like that, truly, because that creates a more beautiful world for me. But it seems to not run the other way around. It seems that people that are like that, they almost have like a vision of technology that is like it's the Antichrist. And I'm like, the second that you have that modality, in my opinion, you're generating negativity and without even realizing it.
Well, or perhaps, to play devil's advocate a bit, and I don't know what side I even fall on necessarily, but there could be a feeling that life itself is not free from suffering on a big enough scale that it's a worthwhile enterprise for certain people to continue to press forward while we continue to repeat generational patterns of trauma and destruction and
Oh, of course I would agree with that.
pain.
But at no point does that imply that you should demolish the progress that humanity has made, that people literally devoted their lives to it. The reason, so I would submit to you that the reason that we can even sit here and postulate this stuff, that we even have the time in the day to do that, is because of technology. Not just because of the phones that allow us to do this, but because of all the stuff that allows us to basically be outside of the food chain. All of that is technology. So the irony is that the only reason we can even sit here and talk about it in any significant way is because we have so much free time on our hands because of technology. So we can actually think about how to better not just our environment, but the environment of other beings. That is something that never occurred on Earth before. And it's all due to technology.
And technology does seem to be closer and closer to replicating a instantly connected collective consciousness, still sort of interrupted by advertising at this point. But
so there's definitely a lot of negative things to it, of course, right? But you realize that most things in nature will kill you, right? So there's danger is always there. It's a modern invention that we somehow made the world dangerous. The world is dangerous, full stop. It's the fact that we got to a certain point of being comfortable enough to postulate that maybe there's a different way. It created the illusion that we are the parents of this extra danger. No, we're living in the same exact world that it always was. It's just that now we have time to pause and look at it, and we're like, oh my God, we all of a sudden notice all of it. Up until that point, we didn't even have time to notice because we were so busy with surviving.
yeah, and I mean, I'm very pro technology personally, while being deeply spiritual, but I think, of a different camp that technology is worthless unless it improves the lived experience.
Absolutely. I think that's part of the understanding. That's part of knowledge. That's why I don't use the word technology, but I use the word knowledge. Because knowledge relates to everything that there is to understand about the world. But for example, you understand that in order to go to the stars, you first have to kind of get your act together as a species, okay? And then you say, okay, well, look, we understand that we are, at some point, some of us will start making these moves, okay? But we definitely want to be the best representatives of humanity out there, right? So we only want to send, we want to be the kind of people that when we go and explore, we don't just mess things up. We actually create beauty. And under that banner, it makes sense to put extra thought into how do we connect to ourselves? How do we heal our traumas? How do we relate differently to one another? How do we don't demonize one another? How do we eradicate xenophobia? All of these questions, which a lot of the wholesome people would ask themselves, fall squarely under the banner of an understanding of what kind of beings we want to be in the universe. So that it's not negating that thought. It just expands it to be even more interesting. Because now there's a whole new reason to do so. Because if we're going to be representing the human species out there, we want to make sure that we are the best representatives of what we can be, right? And by the way,
see, even that is such a different perspective to do it so that we're the best representation.
No, I'm saying so that but this would be under the banner of understanding why this is worthwhile, even in a universal scale. You have to postulate things in your mind that are not still yet here if you want to connect to something, to a function that will take you there. You don't go to space unless you really make an effort. It's not something that just happens. So in order to do that, you have to have a certain strong enough of an idea or an ideal to follow. And the truth is, and this is where the misconception happens very often, it's already the case that the best among us representing us in space. Have you ever met an astronaut that is not like an incredible, outstanding human being?
No, they're like superheroes.
Exactly.
I met 3 at once one time.
Exactly.
I couldn't believe.
So that's already a proof for you that the people who are ultimately chosen by the entire system to represent that function, the people we trust with that, are of the caliber of that kind of a person. And if the system in its entirety, the way that many people imagine it to be, would be evil or like this is the trap, like all that stuff, then there's no way that the representatives that system would pick would be that good of a human.
Okay, but you know what? Actually, astronauts are a really good point because there was I have to look it up. There was an astronaut, Lisa Noaf, right? That people really lost their minds over this news story. There was this thing called the astronaut love triangle. Do you remember this in like 2018?
No, I don't listen to gossip and definitely not to astronaut gossip, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, the reason it broke through, just like that, whatever the astronaut trades would be, is this woman, it doesn't matter the specifics, but she loved a different astronaut and there was a love triangle and she became very jealous, and so she drove through the night and she wore adult diapers so that she could just like drive without having to stop. And that was the splashy headline. But the reason it was so controversial, or the reason it was so headline making, was people were like, but these are astronauts. Okay. How could astronauts be involved in something as messy and sort of like reality TV when they all have PhDs? And
well, no, they don't all have PhDs, but also that they're still human. So the fact that you can find an outlier, so this is the only example you can give me of something that's outlandish, right? So imagine in the history of astronauts, you can give me one example or maybe 2 examples of something that went awry on this level, but they're still humans. My point isn't that they're incapable of doing anything wrong. My point is that if the system that people imagine to be with so many negative elements in it, it couldn't possibly pick as its representative people that are like that. It's not just in their mental achievements. It's just you can see they're just good people. And there's a reason for that, by the way, is because they're actually cooped up together in a very small space together, so they better be good people. So that's actually one of the reasons that they're being picked specifically for these qualities as well, aside from their mental abilities. But the point is that there's this demonization of the technological elements, because the part of the technology that faces most of society is the one that caters to what we want. And this is what people fail to understand, that with all this criticism that they have of technology, the reason it is the way it is, at least the one that we're talking about in social media, which is the only thing that people really know about technology, if you have to be honest, is that it's based on the advertisement system still. And the only way to make money there is to draw attention. How do you draw attention? Well, you pay attention to what people want. So the irony here is that the people who criticize technology don't realize that the reason what they see is so horrible is because that's what they want. And the algorithms are not wrong about that. That is what
No,
they
they're
want.
just like a perfect mirror of our,
Yeah.
of course,
So
desires.
so
But
the,
I
so
think,
so what I'm asking to entertain is that technology is not just TikTok and Instagram. It's
no,
the
for sure.
entirety of what humans could understand about the entirety of the enterprise of what humans could understand about the world that we managed to put into some systems and institutions that managed to do something of greater value than individuals could. And but again, the reason that I always use the word understanding is because and knowledge is because it's much more universal and much more neutral. If it is the case, and I gave this example before, but if we know for a fact that, let's say, we can't even anytime soon do anything about it with CRISPR or whatever the reason is, and it is true that we know that for a fact that people feel much better as individuals in smaller groups than being part of a giant hive like a city. Okay, well then you can design cities because the value of the city is that you can bring a lot of people together. They can work on very big projects that you couldn't do it otherwise because you need a lot of people to do certain things like building rockets, building phones, things like that. Okay, so let's say that you reach the conclusion, yeah, you want more healthy individuals, psychologically, physically, everything. Design a city with giant buildings, but each building is divided in a special way where it's small communities. Like it's a building, but it's designed into hubs
Sure.
instead of rows of
I
doors.
mean, I completely agree with the premise, but the 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 paradox of that the astronauts bring up for me.
Wait, what
And
paradox? Does that actually hold still a paradox in your head? That because
yes,
there's one example of some crazy story that to use, you will always have a crazy story of some sort.
no, but I think like if you look in the comments, what this person Glassfish said, I think to be funny, but it's exactly my point. He or she says, "I knew it was over a man," and that to me is exactly it. It's like we have created astronauts, we've created people that are extraordinary, but when it comes to the basic lived reality of their one life,
Yeah.
it's still the fundamental. I don't. Are you allowed to swear? I was about to swear. It's still the fundamental stuff from biblical times and from long before. All throughout human history, it comes down to like boy likes girl, other girl likes boy.
Sure, but we're slowly overcoming the limbic system. So you will.
But why do we, when we expand and we expand and we expand, and of course the astronaut thing is like a fun example for us all to play with because nobody died and it involves diapers, but the reality of like our extraordinary people are still dealing with the same essential like trauma responses, dysregulated limerence, emotional attachment, jealousy, being spurned by love. These sort of essential dramas have ruled human life since the beginning of time, and we've not moved forward. We haven't moved the needle forward a centimeter.
I disagree. I completely disagree with you.
Well,
I know from experience.
We've repeated every war over and over again.
You look. Listen. This is where the thinking about it in personal terms might be a little bit more helpful. Have you not experienced in your life any movement of your personal evolution where you know for a fact that you were just out of control in some way and now you managed to overcome that thing, or it's much less pronounced in you? You never had that experience?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so if it's possible in you,
most to it was like spirituality, and the spirituality in the realm of people understanding more about the laws of the universe so that you can work effectively with them and recognize like, oh, but it's a trial and error thing, and you have to overcome the nervous system. You have to overcome hormones. You have to learn through mistakes.
The point that I'm making is that you're never gonna get out of this situation. It is what it is for forever. The point is that you want to get to a better and better state of that. So if you're gonna stop trying to evolve, you will still have problems coming at you all the time, and they're not gonna go away. You're just gonna have problems that are what you want is to aim for better problems. That's all. but problems
Yeah, but we
are
haven't
literally
solved
part of
the
existence.
fundamental.
The what?
We're not solving the fundamental. I guess my optimism in the realm of spirituality, in the realm of exploration, is not to introduce ourselves to the universe, but is to improve the lived experience, right? The actual tangible lived experience for as many people as possible all at once. And
As possible is the key.
As possible, of course.
Right. Wait. Don't jump over it so fast. That is my point in full. That's it. That's the only thing you can hope for.
And when we raise when we raise the collective consciousness, we for example, find out that it's a simulation.
That is a computational environment, yeah.
Not does that then give us more information because it's fun to know things, but how does knowing more about gravity help a basketball player jump higher and play the game better? How does knowing more about the perhaps secret or perhaps just yet to be discovered realities and laws of the universe, secret codes, whatever? How can that information help people break patterns, destructive generational patterns of like trauma that we just repeat over and over and over again?
That's for people who really care about that stuff to focus on and figure out.
That's what I mean about like the different schools. This is like I'm over here holding down the divinity school and you're out there holding down physics, and it's just a different approach.
Yeah, but I think it all plays together really nicely.
Yeah, I do too. That's what I think is so great. It's like we can optimistically break those, I'll just call them chains of trauma, because like that's an umbrella term. We know what we're talking about. And the macro, it's a chain of trauma. And the micro, it's an astronaut is wearing an adult diaper to go murder another astronaut, because even though they're extraordinary, they're still also just in love and acting crazy, and maybe even more
Yeah, but
crazy.
listen, this is actually, I don't know if this is necessarily a good example. I don't know enough of the details of the story to actually really comment on it, because it's always in the details, right? So
Right.
I don't know if somebody missed and she just had actually had some mental issues, right? It is true that some people are above, they reached above these states. If not people in the West, you definitely have people in the East that reach these states, which they're much more elevated as humans. So, and I'm telling you from experience that it's possible to get to a state in which you don't really interact with a lot of these emotions. So it's just a matter of how much focus you're putting on every single thing, and the more humans practice particular things, the better they get at it, and then eventually collectively we get better at them because we find systems to do it better. The fact that you will find in 2 million years from now, you will still find cases in which there was like a thing that went awry. It's just the nature of things. But that is not a reason or even an example of why progress is not preferable. Progress is not just preferable.
Progress is not preferable.
Oh yeah, that's the only thing I'm saying. Because a lot of people would say no, but a lot of people would disagree with that, and that's the only thing I'm speaking to.
I know, and I agree with you, and you said this earlier, but I'm really of the camp that to solve a lot of these problems, we have to get creative. We almost have to go to Mars to figure out climate change. Like, they're not diametrically opposed, they're intrinsically linked, because we'll only find solutions by doing things in new ways. Like, that is, or we're doomed to repeat pattern after pattern after pattern and never changes. Absolutely agree with that, and that's the benefit of technology. But I just wonder what, and this is now I'm asking Danny. This is not hypothetical. This is just truly, when you've had this experience with technology, the unique technology that has been revealed and communicated to you and constantly communicated to you. You've been chosen for whatever reason, or you're curious enough that you found what's available to everybody. You're so humble that you refuse to talk about being chosen. So it's fine that you walked into it and everybody could, but you did. And now you have access to information. And I'm asking, what tangibly about
the only access that I have, I gave it to people. The things that I'm still working on and still experimenting with, that I don't have the answers yet, that is remain to be determined. But the truth is that what I can know with certainty I gave it to the world. I said, here's how you can know. That's it.
Because I think it would be a game changer globally or collective conscious wise for people to understand that there is a real benefit to, like you said, maybe transcending or at least not interacting with the emotional world, the low-hanging fruit of the emotional world.
I'm just not in the camp that thinks that unless you can see the benefit right away, then that's the only reason for you to pursue it.
I'm trying to understand what and then I'll let you go because it's also the middle of the night for both of us, I think. But for me, what feels like what would be the benefit of quantum physics, for example, would be people understanding that perception creates reality, that you can awaken to creating some separation between your consciousness and your thoughts. And by interrupting that constant asleep interaction where you're like, well, I'm at the mercy of my emotions and my thoughts. I mean, they are me and I am them, and there's no separation between me and them.
No, actually, there's a lot of separation between you and them.
Well, exactly, but that's an awakening experience. That's something that historically, like, you have to find through spirituality. But if that were as well known as and fundamental and taught as, electricity or the difference between right and left, some things that we just naturally teach kids how to count to 5, things like that. And also, you can interrupt the feedback loop between, like, your essential self and your thoughts and your emotions, like, if that sort of thing. Meditation, for example, we're taught to children, like, what would be, the ramifications, and I would presume that they would be extremely positive, like on a global scale. It would change and shift our consciousness
100%. But that would be without any metaphysical claims. I think if you just introduce meditation to kindergartens, you're already going to change the world within a decade.
But I would argue that the only way to get people to introduce meditation to kindergartners...
No, it's already happening.
There's right, of course, in these, like, beautiful small ways. The Waldorf model, of course, but I'm talking about global change. I'm talking about the capitalist structure that has to see some sort of benefit for it to change, right? For it to...
you would have to present some kind of a benefit.
So that's where, like, the realm of spirituality could benefit. That's why the technology integrated with spirituality could backwards benefit the whole planet in terms of our collective consciousness, to know some things as concrete fact rather than, like, well, it says in the Bible you're supposed to be nice, but instead of anything having to do with faith or religion, and instead concrete information that we can glean from technology, that interrupting, for example, the feedback, the negative feedback between your essential self and your neurotic thoughts and emotions will lead to a longer lifespan because your cortisol levels will drop and your stress will be less, and thus you will live longer. So it does make sense to teach a kindergartner to meditate. I mean, this is like a really simplistic example, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's not just a matter of convincing people that that's the case. It's also convincing people that believe that the other ways are the correct ways. Like, the Catholic Church, and there's a lot of different things that you have to kind of overcome, which are societal biases and things like that as well.
Yeah, but a lot of religion is, and this is going to sound offensive, but this is why I had to drop out of that Master's of Theological Studies. A lot of religion is, a response to some existential fear, right? Like, we have to create a story so that we have a sense of safety because we don't understand certain things. And by understanding more about the nature and laws of the universe, maybe we don't need to create a religious structure. We can say instead, we just see that... maybe I don't need a pope if I understand that the difference between a wave and a particle, and then I can just see that it's not necessarily that there's a God in the sky making decisions based on if I'm good or nice or bad, but more like my future will be affected by my, like, internal state currently, and so I may as well choose a positive one because then it will have... does this make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
It takes us out of the realm of speculative fear-based religious structures and into spirituality that's based in, that's like evidence-based.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's your responsibility.
okay,
That's
but
your responsibility as an adventurer. That's what you must do.
I must do only the thing that feels right in the moment.
It's got to be that. That's the only thing. Or the astronauts will not be the extraordinary ambassadors.
They can still be extraordinary, and they can still show up in the middle of the night and murder each other and still be extraordinary. There's
She
another.
only attempted to murder him, to be fair. And now she lives a quiet life in Texas. I looked it up so that I could be sure.
So you can, so you can stalk her.
No, I gotta find. She's in Texas. We should. Does anybody in the chat in Texas? Does anybody know Lisa?
Lisa, the diaper astronaut.
The diaper astronaut. Oof, this mugshot.
Okay, Lisa. So I'll be honest with you. It's almost 2, and I definitely have to get off early tomorrow. So I have to adjourn.
This morning,
But it was
insane.
Yeah. But thank you so much for a very stimulating conversation. We can potentially continue this tomorrow, but today I have to call it a night. So sorry guys, don't be angry. You can ask all the questions tomorrow. Sorry, say it again.
I said thank you as well. It's lots to think about, and it's really good because I don't think, at least in my school, that these kind of cross-department conversations are ever happening.
Well, they should definitely happen more.
The divinity school is talking to the divinity school and more divinity school. And I don't think anybody's wandering over from the physics lab to interact with us. So it's really nice to like look under the hood of what's going on with the science, with what's going on.
Well, I don't necessarily know if that I represent science, but I definitely represent a more scientific attitude towards the world.
And I don't claim to represent divinity. But it's our background, it's our training, I guess.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Matt. And I was watching your comments, by the way. We'll have this chat tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Peace and love to everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.
Good night.
Good night. Bye, guys. And again, you can always email me if I miss something important. lasersimulationx@gmail.com. Love you guys. Have a good night.